Hi everyone, welcome back to the next series of lessons on the Anglo-Saxons. And we're going to have a little look now about Anglo-Saxon kings and why they were so powerful. So Edexcel and AQA both approached the Anglo-Saxon topic quite differently. Edexcel start at the beginning of the time, they start in 1060 and they go chronologically throughout. AQA do it more thematically. They're looking at the differences between the Saxons and the Normans. So what I thought was probably easiest if I just start from the beginning and go all the way through. So how Edexcel does it, and then AQA at the end will have a whole lesson looking at the comparisons. So we're going to look then at the role of the Anglo-Saxon king. They were incredibly powerful. So England, remember, is a really rich country. It's a really popular country. People want to be rulers. We're going to see that in 1066. People want to be the King of England. It's a great job to have. And you've got lots of powers that you can see down the left side. So 5 powers of the king. At the top there, the first one, lawmaking. So the king can make whatever law they want. So as I go through these, if you be thinking to yourself, why does that make the king powerful? So the king could create new laws, could make sure that they were enforced or the people were following them throughout the country. And the reason that that made him really powerful, he makes the laws. If he wants something to be legal, he can make it so. If he wants something to be illegal, he doesn't like what someone's doing, he just passes a law that stops it. So incredibly powerful. Second one down, money. He can control the production of the silver pennies that they use as money, and you can see an example in the middle. And what Anglo-Saxon kings like to do, like monarchs today, is have a picture of themselves. And you can see there's one of Edward. More on him in a bit. But we're really used to the idea that we're already familiar with our king. We are very familiar with the previous queen. We've seen them on videos, might have seen them in person. In Anglo-Saxon times, that wasn't the case. So people didn't see their king very often, but what they did do is see money, and on the back of the money would be a picture of the king. So next one down, land ownership. So the king owned large estates, grant land out to his followers. He could also take land away from those who'd acted against him. So thinking to yourself, why would that make the king really powerful? And actually, William the Conqueror, even though he's not a Saxon, he's a Norman, when he comes in, he really shows how much power this gives you. So, the king tells you what to do. If you do it, he rewards you with land. If you don't do it, he takes lands away. A really effective way of keeping control. So, if you do as you're supposed to, you get rewarded. If you don't do what you're supposed to, you get punished. Then the next one down, military power. The king had the ability to raise a national army. So you go up to the king and you're like, you in which army? And he'll be like, this one. So we'll have a look in later lessons about how they do it. But basically, officials go into a village where there's ordinary farmers and they're like, you, and you're now in the army. And there is nothing the Saxon farmers can do about it. They have no choice. So enormously powerful. You can raise an army from across the whole country. And then that bottom one, taxation. So the king decided when taxes should be paid. A national taxation system delivered the tax to him. So you're a king, you're feeling like you're a bit short on money. You bring in a tax for 1 year, everyone pays it, you have money. So obviously you have to be a bit careful. If you tax people too much, they tend to get a bit cross and they might start rebelling. But enormous powers. And you can see down the right-hand column as well, all the duties of the people. So they have to obey the laws, including ones about not forging coins. If they're taking land, they've been given land by the king, they might have to pay tax on it. They have to provide fighters for the army, and they have to pay their taxes. So the Saxon kings, enormously powerful. And this is another way, this is really clever of the Saxons. So, when they were 12, Anglo Saxon boys had to swear an oath to be faithful to the king. Girls, they didn't seem to worry about. Girls were going to be controlled by their fathers who would keep them in line, and then when they married, by their husbands. So, it's only the boys that swear an oath to be faithful to the king. So it was a promise made in front of the king's official, who's called the Shire Reeve. That's where we get the word sheriff from. So the Shire Reeve or the sheriff, the king's officials. So when they're 12, boys go in front of him and they swear this oath. It is made in the name of God, and it included a guarantee that everyone, family or stranger, would report them if they were disloyal. This made it an unbreakable oath. So if we just unpick this, this was made in the name of God at a time when people were incredibly religious. They believed hell was a real place, and they were told that if you break an oath, God will punish you. There is a bit in the Bible that says if you break an oath, God will pluck out your eye. More on that in a bit. But you are going to hell if you break this oath. And then the second bit, this is so clever. So it's not just you're going to go to hell if you break it. If you know someone else has broken it and you don't report them, you're going to hell. Even if it's a family member. So you find out the family member you love most in the world has broken the oath. If you don't report them, you're going to spend all of eternity in hell. So this was not something people did lightly. This was a very serious oath, and it really helps Anglo-Saxon kings. So you might not like the king, but you are not going to break your oath to him because look at the consequences. So then we get Edward. So really in this course, there's only two main kings. There's Edward the Confessor for the Saxons, and then there's William for the Normans. And then in 1066, we get a few others. You might remember Harold Godwinson, people like that. So Edward the Confessor, now it's a strange nickname. It's called Confessor because he's Catholic and he goes to confession a lot. So within the Catholic faith, remember all of England's Catholic at this time because we're before Henry VIII and the Church of England. And as part of that, you go and you confess your sins to a priest and you get forgiven. So Edward gets called the Confessor because he's so religious. So he's known for being someone who is really religious, follows God. People really like that. At this time in the Saxon time, being really religious is completely admired, respected, looked up to. So he is King of England for actually a really long time, 1042 to 1066, where he dies of natural causes. And Saxon kings don't tend to actually last that long. If you have a chance, go back and have a look at some of them. Some of them get very short reigns and have very sticky ends. So Anglo-Saxon king is not something you want to be if you want an easy life or a calm life. Edward the Confessor manages it. So when our course starts, he is the Anglo-Saxon king. He's so unusual because most Anglo-Saxons are tough warrior men. And not just the Anglo-Saxons, leaders in other countries, we're going to see that because they're all about to descend on England to fight for the throne in 1066. It's about being tough, being strong, being a good fighter. So none of these men are people you would particularly want to be friends with, not a lot of emotional intelligence, all about the fighting. So Edward doesn't fit this. He's really not a good fighter. However, he ruled over England as a mostly peaceful country for 24 years. His reign only ends when he dies of natural causes. So think to yourself, if he wasn't a fighter, why was he able to do this? So some of it is things that he does and ways that he's good. Some of them are ways that others are good. So his strength. He makes really good laws which kept the country peaceful. So if you are an Anglo-Saxon peasant, you don't want to see the end of Edward the Confessor. So if someone comes up to you and is like, we're going to do a revolt, we're going to get rid of Edward the Confessor, you're like, why? No, no, thank you. He's doing a really good job. So the country's peaceful, people are getting on with their lives without too much bother. He is really religious and people love that. So, third bullet point down, people believed his faith could bring God's blessing on England. So they believed that God was up in heaven watching what was happening and was changing sort of the course of history to favour Edward. So God's watching is that Edward the Confessor really liked this guy, think he's amazing. I'm not going to let anything bad happen to him. They also believe that God could guide his actions. So Edward Confessor prays a lot. God inspires him in what God wants him to do. So there is a sort of sense at this time that if you go against the king, you're going against God. But the bottom one is really important. He had strong earls to help him rule. So he wasn't very good at fighting, but he's surrounded by men who are brilliant at fighting. So think to yourself, in what way is that really helpful? In what way could that be a bit dangerous? So Edward the Confessor, highly intelligent, very religious, very sensible man, made very sensible rules, a really good king in lots of ways. So then the last little thing we're going to look at his weaknesses. So he's not a warrior king. He completely relies on his earls, which is fine as long as the earls are happy with that. But the second they don't want to help him anymore, Edward's in trouble. The second the earls decide that actually they'd rather be king and not Edward, Edward is in trouble. And then the third bullet point, as he didn't lead his country into wars, he doesn't gain enemy land. So he has nothing to reward his followers with to keep them happy and loyal. So ordinary Saxon peasants think he's great. Higher up, there's a few more murmurings. The Godwin family, we are going to come across this family, this amazing family ruled by Earl Godwin. Sometimes they're called the House of Godwin, sometimes they're called the Godwin family. So Earl Godwin at the top, and then his sons, all of whom are brilliant fighters. And they're going to come up. This is where Harold Godwin's son is from. So the Godwin family had more thanes, local lords, than the king, and were as rich as the king. So they've got lots of money, lots of power. And finally, the Danelaw accepted Edward as king. So Danelaw, it's a bit of a funny name, not a law, which is a really common mistake, and we can see why. It's an area of land. So the Danelaw area of land, Yorkshire, northern England, all the way down to East Anglia. So it's an area of land that has a lot of Viking ancestry there. When the Vikings land, they tend to go straight for the Danelaw. So you've got lots of people there that have Viking and Saxon ancestry. So they accepted Edward as the king, but they have their own rules, their own customs, their own local leaders, and they are going to be a problem later on in our story. But that's for another lesson.